The last light. It started like a shadow, subtle at first. A stiffness in my left leg, a twinge in my ribs that I blamed on late nights, on lifting boxes, on being alive. I didn't notice how it grew, how it spread like a whisper of doom, until one day it wasn't just discomfort, it was a scream in my bones. The hospital smelled of antiseptic and fear. I remember that first morning like a photograph in sepia, fluorescent lights flickering, the low hum of machines, nurses moving like ghosts. I sat in the waiting room, my hands trembling on my knees, listening to the coughs, the whispered conversations, the occasional sharp cry that cut through the air. When the doctor finally called me in, I thought I could steel myself. I thought I had courage. But courage has a way of melting when a word like terminal falls into your chest. Stage 4. Aggressive. Rare. Untreatable by ordinary means. I nodded like a machine, my face blank, because screaming wouldn't fix it. Words seemed inadequate. They had no power here. I left the office and stepped outside. The sun was cruelly bright, mocking me with warmth, and I realized that day how much I had taken light for granted. The first treatment was a revelation in horror. Chemotherapy is not just medicine. It is fire. It burns through your veins, clawing at everything inside you until you feel like your own body has become the enemy. I vomited on the floor of the hospital bathroom. My hair began falling in tufts, my nails blackened, and sleep became a fragile dream I could barely reach. I became a ghost in my own life. Friends stopped calling, people didn't know what to say, and Noah, he was there, always there. Even when I didn't want to see anyone, when the smell of antiseptic made my stomach revolt, when I tried to hide behind walls of fatigue and shame, he sat beside me. His hand found mine, even when I pulled away. His voice cut through the fog. "You are not alone." I wanted to argue. I wanted to scream that I was alone, that life had abandoned me, that this pain was mine and mine alone. But every time I looked at him, I saw the reflection of a heart unwilling to quit, a love refusing to falter. So I let him stay. Days bled into nights. The hospital became a liminal world, where time was meaningless. Machines beeped like sinister lullabies. I memorized every tile on the walls, every crack in the linoleum floor, the precise way the sunlight hit the nurse's station at 2 p.m. Pain was constant. Some nights I lay in bed counting the heartbeats, listening to my own ragged breath, willing my body not to fail me entirely. There were moments when the shadows in the corners of the room seemed to move, whispering that I was nothing, that the light had left me for good. I gritted my teeth and whispered back, "Not yet." I didn't know who I was anymore. My reflection was a stranger's face in the mirror. Hollow eyes, cheekbones sharpened by starvation, hair gone. But somewhere deep inside, I was still fighting. Not for myself, not for the hospital staff, not even for Noah, though he gave me the courage to try, but for the small slivers of life that had always mattered, the first cup of coffee in the morning, the laughter of a child outside my window, the wind against my cheek when I was allowed to walk outside. It was during one of these walks, wrapped in a hospital blanket that smelled faintly of bleach, that I first saw her. A small girl, no older than 9, sitting alone on a bench with an oxygen tube snaking into her nose. She was staring at the sky, but her eyes were heavy, resigned. I recognized the look, the way the world had taken everything she had without asking, the way she held her own life like a fragile porcelain doll afraid to break. I sat beside her. She flinched. I offered a small smile. "Hi, I'm Elias." She didn't answer at first. Then softly, she whispered, "I'm Mia." We started meeting during my walks. I told her stories of strange lands, of oceans made of clouds, of dragons who weren't terrifying but kind. She began to laugh, and in that laughter, I felt something I hadn't in months: warmth, hope. But the disease was relentless. One night, my fever spiked, delirium washing over me in waves. I saw visions, shadows turning into monsters, walls dripping with dark liquid, my body folding in on itself like a crumpled paper. And in the middle of the chaos, I heard Noah's voice, steady and unwavering. "Fight, Elias. Don't let it take you tonight." I clawed back from the edge. The hallucinations receded like smoke. The monsters didn't vanish, but I remembered something. Fighting isn't always about winning. Sometimes it's about standing your ground when the world wants to break you. Weeks passed. Treatments worked. Tumors shrank. But the body, once pushed to its brink, leaves scars that medicine can't erase. My skin was mottled, my bones brittle, my heartbeat erratic. And still, I refused to surrender. I wrote letters for those I loved. Noah, my parents, Mia. Letters for the days when I wouldn't be able to speak, when my presence would no longer be enough. I wrote about life, about beauty, about hope. I wrote about how terrifying it is to love and be loved, and how the terror is part of the beauty. Even when I could barely lift a pen, I wrote. The final night came quietly. I was in my hospital bed, tubes and wires tethering me to the machines that hummed like distant choirs. Noah held my hand, his thumb brushing mine in gentle, relentless assurance. I felt the shadows creeping closer, the weight in my chest growing unbearable. I closed my eyes and let the memories flood in. The first time I held Noah's hand, the laughter of Mia, the smell of rain on city streets, the warmth of my mother's embrace. And then, something changed. The shadows softened, colors shifted. I felt a hand, not mine, not Noah's, but something warmer, broader, guiding me. I opened my eyes in the vision of a vast landscape, surreal and impossible. A golden forest, rivers that glimmered like molten silver, skies bleeding with light I had never seen. I walked, or floated, I couldn't tell, and yet I felt no fear. A voice, gentle and infinite, whispered, "You have fought enough." I looked back, and for a heartbeat, I saw my body in the hospital bed, tubes and all. I saw Noah's tears, Mia's tentative smile, my parents' trembling hands. I realized then that leaving didn't erase the love, didn't undo the fight. The light I carried, courage, hope, memories, would remain. I stepped forward. The next morning, the nurses found my bed empty of life. Noah was crying, silent and broken, holding my hand one last time. Mia, too, sat quietly, a small flower she had picked on her hospital stroll resting on the windowsill. But in the halls, in whispered stories, in the letters I left behind, my presence lingered. Nurses spoke of how I had held the little girl's hand when she couldn't sleep, how I had told stories to calm fear, how I had smiled through the worst nights when every breath hurt. Even in death, I had prevailed. The hospital held vigils. People remembered me not just as a patient, but as a survivor in spirit. Every person I had touched carried a spark, a reminder that courage isn't measured in days or survival, but in defiance of despair. Noah kept my letters in a small wooden box by his bed. He read them when the nights were too long, when grief felt like a storm he couldn't weather. He smiled sometimes, remembering my jokes, my insistence on finding beauty even in the sterile hospital walls. Mia grew stronger, always carrying the dragons I had conjured for her. She drew pictures of golden forests and rivers of silver, insisting that I had shown them to her in a dream. And in that, I realized the truth. Horror may claim the body, pain may consume the flesh, but the spirit survives. In love, in memory, in every quiet act of courage, I had won. I am gone, my body rests. But the light I carried, the fight I refused to abandon, lingers in those who witnessed it. Every story whispered, every tear and smile, every small act of bravery. That is my victory. And as the sun rises over the city, I feel it. Warm, unwavering, infinite. I had fought the darkness. I had seen horror, faced despair, and walked through the fire. And in the end, I am not afraid. Because I prevailed. Not in life, but in everything that matters beyond it.